Populism is sweeping across the globe, but what exactly is it? You've probably heard the word a lot, but did you know that in 2019, over 40% of the world's population lived in countries with populist leaders? That's a huge chunk of the planet. It's clear that populism is not just a trend, it's becoming a major force in politics. Populism claims to represent the ordinary people and challenges the elite, or those in power. From the rise of leaders like Donald Trump in the US to Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro, populism is reshaping political landscapes in unexpected ways. But is it all good? Or are there darker sides to this movement? In this video, we'll dive into the world of populism and explore the key strategies that make it so powerful. We'll uncover the shocking rise of populism in places you wouldn't expect, look at its impact on global politics, and question if it's a force for change or chaos. Stick with us, and you might just see politics in a whole new light. Chapter 1: The Populist Puzzle. What is it, really? Populism is one of those terms we hear a lot, but it's often used without a clear definition. In simple terms, populism is a political approach that claims to represent the common people against the elite. It's a movement that says the people's will should be central in making decisions, often challenging the existing political system. Populism can appear in many forms, from left-wing movements focusing on social equality to right-wing ones focusing on nationalism. What's interesting is that populism isn't just a modern phenomenon. It's been around for centuries, popping up during times of crisis. For example, in the late 19th century, the Populist Party in the United States rose out of frustration with economic inequality and political corruption. The same patterns of frustration have sparked populist movements across the world today. A key strategy of populism is the use of simple language. Populist leaders often speak in ways that connect directly with ordinary people. For example, former US President Donald Trump's catchphrase, "Make America Great Again," spoke to many who felt left behind by the political elite. It's a clever, emotional appeal that cuts through complex policy discussions. Populist leaders also use us versus them rhetoric, dividing the world into two groups, the people and the elite. This tactic creates a sense of unity among followers, who feel they are part of something larger. It's a strategy that's proven effective in rallying support during difficult times. In fact, a study by political scientist C.A. Mutter found that populist parties often thrive in countries facing economic downturns. One interesting fact is that populism tends to thrive in democracies, where people expect to have a say in how they're governed. It's the perfect environment for populist leaders to capitalize on dissatisfaction with traditional parties. In countries like Hungary, Poland, and Brazil, populism has gained significant traction in recent years, often promising to shake up the political system. Populism's flexibility is one of its strengths. While it can be found in both left-wing and right-wing movements, the core strategy remains the same: appeal to the masses and position oneself as a champion of the people. Chapter 2: The Rise of Populism. From protest to power. The rise of populism isn't a random event. It often happens during times of political, social, or economic crisis. One such moment came after the 2008 financial crash. Economic hardship, unemployment, and rising inequality set the stage for populist movements to take root in many countries. Leaders like Spain's Pablo Iglesias, who founded the populist party Podemos, tapped into the widespread anger over the government's handling of the crisis. Another key moment in populist history is the Brexit referendum. In 2016, Britain voted to leave the European Union, a decision driven in part by populist sentiments. Many voters felt that the elite had ignored their needs, especially regarding immigration and economic change. The campaign was led by figures like Nigel Farage, who framed the EU as an overbearing, disconnected elite. Populism also surged in the US with Donald Trump's election in 2016. Trump's platform was built on criticizing the political establishment, promising to drain the swamp of Washington, D.C. His campaign used social media as a direct way to communicate with voters, bypassing traditional media outlets that often criticized him. Social media has become a key tool in populist movements globally, enabling leaders to bypass the gatekeepers of traditional news. In Brazil, populist leader Jair Bolsonaro capitalized on widespread dissatisfaction with corruption and crime. By aligning himself with anti-establishment rhetoric, Bolsonaro was able to rally a large portion of the electorate to his cause. His victory in 2018 is a testament to the growing power of populism in Latin America. Data shows that populism often gains traction in countries with rising inequality. A 2017 study by the International Monetary Fund (IMF) found that higher levels of economic inequality can lead to greater support for populist parties. This is because populist movements promise to reduce the power of the elite and redistribute wealth more fairly. Populism's success in gaining power is linked to its ability to tap into people's emotions and frustrations. It's not just about offering policies, it's about creating a sense of identity and belonging. In many ways, populism isn't just about politics, it's about creating a movement that people feel personally connected to. Chapter 3: Populism versus Elitism. The battle for the soul of politics. The battle between populism and elitism is as old as democracy itself. Populists argue that the political elite, business leaders, government officials, and intellectuals, are out of touch with the needs of everyday people. They often claim that these elites are more interested in maintaining their own power than in solving the problems of ordinary citizens. Populist movements thrive by positioning themselves as the voice of the voiceless. By framing politics as a struggle between the people and the elites, they create a clear narrative that resonates with those who feel ignored. This, us versus them, rhetoric can be extremely powerful, especially when people feel that their voices aren't being heard. In many cases, populist leaders accuse elites of being corrupt or self-serving. For instance, in Italy, the populist five-star movement has made anti-corruption a central part of its platform. They argue that the traditional political class has failed the people and that a new, more transparent system is needed. On the other hand, elites often argue that populism is dangerous because it challenges the established order. They claim that populist leaders often make unrealistic promises, focusing on short-term solutions rather than long-term stability. In a 2019 speech, European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker warned that populism can lead to dangerous nationalism that undermines democratic institutions. However, populism's appeal lies in its promise to shake up the system. For many, the elite is seen as a self-interested group that ignores the needs of the broader population. A study by the Pew Research Center found that people who feel economically disadvantaged are more likely to support populist candidates. Populists often promise to return power to the people by decentralizing authority, reducing the influence of large corporations, and empowering local communities. For example, Bernie Sanders in the US has championed policies that challenge corporate power and advocate for wealth redistribution. His message speaks to those who feel left behind by global capitalism. If you want to dive deeper into the clash between populism and elitism, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more insights. Chapter 4: The Dark Side of Populism, Danger or Revolution. While populism can empower disenfranchised groups, it also comes with risks. One of the major dangers is that populist movements can breed division within society. By creating an us versus them mentality, populist leaders can fuel resentment between different groups, whether political, social, or ethnic. Another risk is that populist leaders often challenge democratic institutions. In Hungary, for example, Prime Minister Viktor Orban has used populism to consolidate power and limit press freedom. He argues that he is protecting the will of the people, but critics say he's undermining the democratic process. Populist leaders are also known for adopting authoritarian tendencies. In Turkey, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has used populist rhetoric to justify crackdowns on opposition and the media. He claims to be defending the nation against foreign enemies, but his actions have led many to question whether he is eroding Turkey's democracy. One of the most concerning aspects of populism is how it can fuel nationalism. In countries like Poland and Hungary, populist leaders have used nationalist rhetoric to consolidate power, often blaming immigrants for societal problems. This can lead to increased xenophobia and a decline in social cohesion. Data from the Economist Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index shows that populist governments are more likely to score poorly on measures of political rights and civil liberties. In countries where populism has gained a strong foothold, the risk of authoritarianism is higher. However, it's important to note that not all populist movements are inherently dangerous. In some cases, they can lead to positive change, especially when they challenge corruption or advocate for the rights of marginalized groups. But the line between reform and authoritarianism can be thin, making populism a double-edged sword. Chapter 5: Populism for the People, the Case for Empowerment. Populism, at its core, is about empowering ordinary people. It gives a voice to those who feel disconnected from traditional politics. For example, in the US, Bernie Sanders' populist approach has resonated with millions of Americans who believe the system is rigged against them. Populism can also challenge entrenched power structures that prioritize the interests of the elite. In Greece, the Syriza party used populist rhetoric to challenge austerity measures imposed by the European Union. Their message of economic justice resonated with many who had seen their living standards deteriorate during the financial crisis. In Latin America, populism has often been associated with leaders like Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. Chavez used populist rhetoric to challenge both domestic elites and foreign powers, positioning himself as a champion of the poor. While his policies were controversial, they did bring attention to the issue of wealth inequality in the region. Populism can also empower marginalized communities. The rise of left-wing populism in the US and Europe has led to greater focus on issues like income inequality, healthcare, and climate change. These issues are often sidelined by traditional political parties, but populist movements force them to the forefront. Populist leaders often position themselves as outsiders, free from the corrupt influence of traditional politicians. This outsider status can make them more relatable to voters, who may feel that career politicians are disconnected from their needs. This relatability is a key strategy that populists use to build a loyal following. Chapter 6: Populism's Future. A global phenomenon in the making. Populism is not a passing trend. It's a global phenomenon that continues to grow. According to the Economist Intelligence Unit, populist parties have gained ground in nearly every region of the world, from Europe to Latin America to Asia. The rise of social media has only amplified this trend, making it easier for populist leaders to connect with supporters. One of the key factors driving the future of populism is the changing global economy. As inequality rises and traditional job markets shrink, many people are looking for alternatives to the status quo. Populist leaders are stepping into this gap, offering a narrative that challenges the existing economic system. Additionally, the cultural divide between urban elites and rural populations is becoming more pronounced. Populism is likely to continue to resonate in rural areas, where people feel disconnected from the urban centers that drive political and economic decisions. Finally, the future of populism may depend on how it adapts to the digital age. Social media has become a powerful tool for populist leaders, allowing them to bypass traditional media and speak directly to voters. This trend is only expected to grow, with populist movements increasingly relying on online platforms to spread their message. Want to stay updated on how populism shapes our world? Subscribe to our channel for more insightful videos and deep dives into the topic.